Well, folks, I guess now we have the answer to the question, what if Kyle Rittenhouse was black? Well, I guess it wasn't even necessarily a question. People were just kind of making statements, direct statements suggesting that if Kyle Rittenhouse had been black, he would have been gunned down by the police or, much more harshly treated. But here we have the contrast in the story about Simpkins versus Rittenhouse. And I'm going to be doing a separate video with more details about Simpkins. But basically, apparently he got into a fight at school and then went and got a gun and opened fire and almost killed the person who attacked him, but also injured innocent people in the process. And was released within 24 hours on $75,000 bail. The media is treating these two things very differently. Let's take a look at that. So in this article here on Mike.com, this article is about Anthony Huber's family suing the police department in Kenosha. We have the following statements. Make no mistake, if Kyle Rittenhouse had been black or had been wearing a Black Lives Matter t-shirt, there is no way on God's green earth he would have been allowed to walk away. More likely, he would have been shot dead in the street. Or we could take this article here from the Chicago Sun-Times. Don't make 17-year-old Kenosha shooter a hero. The treatment of Kenosha shooter Kyle Rittenhouse of Antioch shows why America has a policing problem. This 17-year-old vigilante is no hero. August 28, 2020. Let's take a look at what they had to say about the racial issue. How does a teenage vigilante get to be the hero? A white police officer in Kenosha, Wisconsin shot Jacob Blake Jr., a black man, in the back for reasons that are still unclear. Well, those reasons are clear now. He was basically a rapist with a warrant out for his arrest for said rape, and he was violating the restraining order that said rape victim had on him while attempting to take her vehicle and abduct her children. So anyway, I digress. I have a different video about that. But anyway. But a white teenager, Kyle Rittenhouse, could walk down a public street in the same city during a chaotic protest in violation of curfew with a military-style semi-automatic long gun strapped over his shoulder, and police officers didn't stop him. Now, it's interesting, again, how the details of these sorts of things always get left out, but a lot of people were in violation of curfew that night, and nobody wants to talk about that. They also don't want to talk about the nature of, as far as to what the activism that I put in quotes was, of the Black Lives Matter movement in Kenosha that night was. They were systematically going business to business, trying to burn the place down. Kyle's group came into conflict with them, not because they attacked them, but because they put out a fire in a dumpster. Anyway, so this is the problem, and it is the problem that can't be solved by people who are blind to their racial biases. Do you really think a young African-American male could walk down the middle of the street during a protest march carrying a semi-automatic weapon and police wouldn't stop him? Yeah, I guess this could never happen. So back to the article, and then there's this. Rittenhouse has been described as someone who is fascinated with police, and there are videos of him marching like he is the police, boldly carrying a weapon he's too young to even hold. If he were a black youth, he would be depicted as a thug or a gangbanger or a criminal. But he is white. And because he is white, he is likely to be seen by many as a young person who is seduced by the militia movement, or just some wannabe police officer. So, anyway, this was how the media handled Kyle Rittenhouse, and there were far more despicable, total failures in journalism that took place, including implying that Gage Grosskreutz had surrendered and Kyle shot him anyway. But I've been over that in separate videos. So let's wrap this up. So the gist of it is that people are suggesting that if Kyle Rittenhouse were black, he never would have made it safely into police custody. But there is something that both Rittenhouse and Simpkins have in common, and that is that they both turned themselves into police and as a result were safely taken into police custody. Let's take a look.
School shooting suspect 18-year-old Timothy Simpkins is in police custody, facing 3 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon after opening fire at the Timberview High School in Arlington, Texas, and going on the run for a short while before turning himself in Wednesday afternoon.
He did report to an attorney, was talking to our homicide detectives, and he drove him into our police station. We took him into custody.
Police say they believe the gun used in the shooting has been recovered and has been turned over to federal agents for analysis.
So what they're suggesting is that if you turn yourself into police peacefully and don't resist arrest, you have a much higher chance of surviving getting into police custody. That's the issue. That's why Kyle didn't get hurt. That's why Simpkins didn't get hurt. Period. I'm going to make a separate video specifically about the Timberview shooting, and we'll get into that later. This whole issue of the almost like mass psychosis that, compels people to try to like rethink things, from a racial perspective can lead to some pretty toxic places. Some of you guys might remember the incident when a gorilla was shot because a child had fallen into the gorilla enclosure, and there were a bunch of people who made similar assumptions. This gorilla was taken from its homeland, put in captivity, then killed to preserve white life. That sounds familiar. The gorilla was minding his own business. It's the mama's fault. And the curious little white boy want to bother black people don't even go by the rail. Killing an endangered gorilla in a zoo for a white boy's safety is white privilege. If the boy was black, they would have found a tranquilizer. At the end of the day, the gorilla was minding his own business, white parenting at its finest. If the gorilla knew they was kill him, they should have choked that little white boy like Melvin did Jody. I don't see what anyone says the little boy should have been shot for threatening the gorilla's life. The little white boy, specifically. I really feel bad for that gorilla. He was living his life, next thing he know, a white boy trespassing in his home, but he getting shot for it. This gorilla wasn't trying to die today over a dumbass little white boy with stupid parents. R.I.P. my dog. And here's a picture over here at the bottom of white kid in question. Now, I'm glad that this kid got rescued, but this is an example, again, of the racial hatred that's being encouraged by the supposedly, equality-based civil rights movement in its current incarnation. This is the kind of toxic nonsense that comes out of it, and I want you to think about this anytime you analyze one of these. Because all the time, on Twitter, and I did actually a different video about this called Twitter Racism is Fun, is that this question of what if the person was white or what if the person was black gets asked all the time. And now we racialize everything, and it's very quickly becoming the acceptable answer, that the black person in the question is the victim, and the white person in the question is automatically the villain. And if there's any question about what the disparity is becoming, well, we can just take a look again at this. As I said before, I'm going to do a separate video on this topic, and I'll actually be working on that immediately as soon as I'm done with this one. I just wanted to separate this specific issue so that we can actually take a closer look at what happened with Mr. Simpkins. And it's a little more complicated than people initially expected. But with that said, if there was any kind of disparity at this point, the guy on the left is literally walking free within 24 hours with a $75K bail. The guy on the right was in jail for 2 months, and then his bail was set at $2 million, and the prosecutor tried to get him, for bail violations just because of pictures taken and things like that. So, yeah, I guess we have the question answered now. What if Kyle Rittenhouse was black? Thanks for listening.